think it was 1 week after launching the site, the first person reached out to me, and then it was just like a deluge of
Oh,
traffic, which was horrifying because it meant there were so
oh.
many more people with the problem than any statistic would have you believe.
So now that we're on the topic of your site, I'm so curious to know, and a lot of my followers are curious to know as well, what made you so inspired that you started liveUTIfree.com?
It was definitely my own experience with trying to gather information, try to find science behind this. I kept on just coming up against really superficial information with symptoms lists and guidance on how to take antibiotics for a couple of days and how you should be fine then. But I was also seeing that there was a lot of people that weren't fine. And when I'd start to talk to friendship groups of mine, there would always be at least one person who had the same problem or had experienced it in the past. And that just frustrated me so much that there was clearly so many people suffering from this, but no place that you could go online and get actionable information. Everything was the same. And I started to interview women with the problem to see if their experiences were like mine and to see if it would make sense to build a site like this. And I heard so much of the same from each person I spoke to. Their journeys were very similar and they'd all reached a point where they were just dealing with it. So I decided it would make sense to bring all the science into one place and try to launch a site that could help people, with the hope of maybe reaching a few people and thinking it would take a while to hear from anybody. But I think it was 1 week after launching the site, the first person reached out to me, and then it was just like a deluge of
Oh,
traffic, which was horrifying because it meant there were so many people, so
oh.
many more people with the problem than any statistic would have you believe. And so it's been amazing to build this community, but also so disheartening to find out how many people are suffering from this problem and not finding help. And that's how Live UTI Free became what it is. But I do have to say, I took a year between recovery and starting Live UTI Free to just not think about it because I was so tired. It's a tiring thing to go through, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
But I couldn't stop thinking about it and how all these people were suffering. And I just wanted to do what I could, basically.
Oh my goodness. I got chills just hearing that. It's like on one hand, it's like great because it means like what you're doing is working and you're running a successful blog. On the other hand, it's like, oh, that means that like people need the help. Like that's not good. That's not
No,
an ideal situation. So has your site transpired into something else, or is it exactly what you wanted it to be from the very beginning?
in some ways, both. So we always wanted to provide information and education and explanations of scientific information that people could understand at any level. And then with a future goal to put research into action so that we could make change, because we needed researchers to understand this problem, how many people have the problem, and the fact that they're not being listened to. And we have reached that point now where we're partnering with researchers in the US and the UK, and we're actively involved in research. And the data that we collect through our site, which is all anonymous, really helps for those researchers to take this problem seriously because of the numbers of people coming through our site and how willing they are to participate. And so we can now help recruit for studies. And we're kind of in a position that we always wanted to be, that we can help guide the research. And that is the most important thing that we could do, I think.
So for people who haven't been to your site yet, um, can you quickly just give them the rundown of like what they can expect?
So there's the quiz, which is a good place to start. That's what you mentioned. That can help you just to find maybe the first couple of articles to read. But we really take it from the basics of what is a urinary tract infection right up to going into depth on different types of testing. So DNA-based testing, as well as other approaches like phage therapy and home remedies and what the science are behind those. So we try to provide evidence, or what evidence there is. And if there isn't evidence, we also say that. So it's very neutral. We don't recommend one test over another. We don't recommend one approach over the other, but we try to provide links to the science so that you can learn as much as you can and potentially take that to your doctor to get them to help you in the way that you want to be helped.
And on your site, do you talk about some of the common causes of UTIs?
So causes is kind of a two-layered thing. Causes could
Yeah.
actually be what the organism is that's causing it, or it could be the trigger. So
Right.
everybody talks about it in a different way. I think patients often are referring to the trigger rather than E. coli or Klebsiella, for instance. And so the most common cause that's been documented is E. coli, but there is research in the recurrent UTI population to suggest that that might not be the most common cause amongst those people. And maybe that is why they're in this recurrent population. So they're finding other organisms that are quite common among that population, whereas they aren't amongst the population that just has acute UTIs and then they get better. But then there's also things like sex, which can be a trigger, or exercise for some people.
Oh, sex was definitely a trigger for
Yeah,
me.
and that's
When
a
I had
super
sex, I'd get a
common one.
UTI.
Yeah, it's
Oh.
probably the most common trigger. So there's also strategies, and we offer some information around that, like what you might want to try to help that not happen. It's not always possible, but there are strategies. And so the cause, it really depends on the person and which way you look at it, I think.
Now, you have more than just stories with UTIs and yeast infections. You also have other health challenges that you face, and that is the golden egg of this whole interview. That's what I've been saving, because you have not shared this before with your fans, and I'm sure they would love to hear what else you face. Do you want to share that with us?
I can. I wouldn't exactly call it a golden egg. That is not what it felt like to me.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to call it like something happy, but this
fine,
is for me what I was trying to get to build up to in this interview. Because I go through lupus and you go through your chronic illnesses as well. It's not always UTI.
It's not. And sometimes it can be a surprise. So last year, I started to suffer from symptoms that were clearly not normal for me. And the kind of symptoms that doctors are going to dismiss because they're vague and they're things that they like to put down to anxiety or just the way that women are. So I was basically feeling bloated all the time, and I started to put on weight for no reason. And I had no appetite. I couldn't eat more than just a mouthful, and I would feel full instantly. And then my cycle just stopped, and I didn't get a period for a couple of months. And that has never happened to me before. But knowing that doctors would see those symptoms and think I was just upset with putting on weight. And of course, cycles sometimes are different. And it was a pandemic, so I'm just anxious. I booked a series of appointments with different doctors, hoping that one of them would listen. And it was the last one that I went to see that actually listened and believed me and kept on looking, and ended up sending me to emergency at the emergency gynecological clinic at the hospital, because she was quite worried that I might have cancer because of the symptoms that I had. And I went through a battery of tests which made my symptoms worse, just the poking and the prodding and everything. They ended up discovering that I had endometriosis, which in hindsight is not surprising because I've since discovered it's genetic and it does run in my family somewhat, but he had really taken the time to tell me that. So I didn't know what was going on. And it was surprising because I don't fit the classic endometriosis symptoms of the ones that so many people suffer, and it can be so uncomfortable and so painful. But I ended up quickly booking surgery in a different country. I interviewed 5 surgeons in different countries, knowing that it's really important to find the right surgeon for endometriosis. And last year, it's actually the anniversary of my surgery today. So I went through excision surgery, which was complex and much more major than expected. And the surgeon explained it to me as silent endometriosis, the kind that doesn't give you the symptoms that you'd expect. But because of that, it's also just getting worse and worse. And you don't know until it tips over that point. And then it's kind of too late. It's impacting all your organs, and the surgery becomes much more complex than it would have been if it had been detected 15 years ago, which it wasn't. And I can look back on certain things that happened over my life and attribute them to probably endometriosis, but they were so fleeting and not things I necessarily saw a doctor for, that I'll never know. But yeah, and since then, because I had to have a catheter and I had to keep it for a number of days, I ended up with a catheter associated UTI, hospital acquired version, which is the most nightmare phrase. I've had UTIs before. And so this has been quite the year of lockdowns, which I must say were a positive thing for me because it took away the pressure of trying to be better to do anything. I've just been hanging out in my apartment and taking it one step at a time and recovering, doing the exercises I need to do and addressing the UTI basically.
Wow. So you've been through the ringer with your UTIs and these other health conditions that you have. It makes me so angry that you didn't get an answer before. I personally can relate to that. By the time I had gotten a diagnosis, I had been going to the doctor for years and no one knew what to do with me. I was a unique case because I was a teenager. So doctors just assumed that I was trying to get out of school or something. But your situation sounds like you didn't have these symptoms long enough, or maybe you just didn't have the right doctor who was like, light bulbs, something's wrong here.
Yeah, some of them seem obvious in retrospect, but the symptoms hadn't been around that long. It was just a couple of months before I went to the doctor. And because it was bloating, I thought it will pass, and it didn't. So getting someone to take those kinds of symptoms seriously, the first 3 or 4 doctors I saw just said, it's because you're a woman. And I was like, well, I've always been a woman. So why hadn't this happened before? And so I just kept on moving until I found someone that listens, which is not always an option for people. And that's why it's so hard to get a diagnosis.
For those of our viewers who aren't dealing with a health condition or like a UTI per se, but are watching on behalf of a loved one, what is something that you can share with them that would be helpful for the person who they're watching for? I have been through situations where someone has been like, after I told them that I have lupus, oh, you look great. Nothing looks like anything is wrong with you. And I hate hearing that. It's like, what does ill look like? Don't have a cast. I'm not in a wheelchair. What is something like one tip that you can give a loved one to tell their loved one how to show support?
It's something that is difficult, definitely. I think not assuming and just asking what you can do is a good place to start. And for some people, it's as simple. Yeah, sometimes it's as simple as not asking how you feel all the time. That can be a trigger for some people.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
I don't want to talk about it. And that's definitely a trigger for me. And
me too.
A really good place to start. Do you want me to ask you how you feel, or would you prefer me not to? So,
don't ask.
Yeah. Another thing is to see if you can join any of the support groups, and you can ask questions like that in those groups. How can I best support my partner or my loved one in this situation? A lot of people have good advice around that.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Sometimes it's like you don't want someone to ask you because it just reminds you. I remember my dad used to be like, I'm sorry you're in pain. And I'd be like, Dad, for the last time, I'm not in pain. I just don't feel well.
I get that too with pain. People constantly say, are you still in pain? And I say, I wasn't in pain. That's one of the reasons I'm in this situation. I didn't have the pain. And if I had, maybe I would have got a diagnosis. But it's funny the things that can trigger you when people are trying to be sweet or compassionate, and it is exactly the wrong thing to say.
Exactly. And that's why I feel it's so great that we have this community that we can share our, like illnesses, because, sometimes it's nice to have people who understand you and who are going through the same thing.
Yeah, a lot of people find that helpful. And I would encourage people to join the support groups. There are a lot of them on Facebook now, if they feel like that's something they would like. It's not for everybody, but it can be helpful to talk to people that can relate.
Of course, I used to be a part of a group called the Invisible Illness Crew for invisible illnesses, and it was part of an international women's group that I'm a part of called The Wing. You may or may not have heard it, but there was something brilliant that the group organizer had said that really clicked with me. And the things that she had said, when we're all venting to each other in a circle, it's a safe space. And she said, and I'm going to read them off to you. She said, don't solicit medical advice unless we're specifically asked. Don't tell someone to look on the bright side or that the situation is not that bad. Seems obvious, right? If someone vents, vent with them, say in agreement how much that sucks. Don't tell someone what they should be doing unless they ask. Let people finish speaking, hear what they have to say, comfort them. Don't just sit there hearing isn't listening. You know, you have to actually be an active listener. I think that these are just things that everyone can follow, whether you have, you know, health conditions or not.
Yeah, they're really great. And that's kind of what our community guidelines follow too. It's not about telling someone else what worked for you and encouraging them to try it. It's not helpful in general. Maybe it will work for one person, but for every single other person, it won't help.
Exactly.
So it's more about asking questions and asking for resources than it is about sharing one experience and encouraging others to do the same.
Exactly. And how do you think that, as we're coming to the end of our interview, and I'm sad because I've had such a great time with you and I wish it would last forever, but what can we say right now to offer our viewers hope that whatever they're going through, whether it's a UTI or chronic illness, how can we offer them hope to continue with their journey and don't give up till they get answers?
I mean, I guess that's individual too, but the support groups are a good place to start. You can't always find people that have recovered, but you can find people that are on the way to. So that's helpful. But also just to look into the research that's happening. And that's what's helped our community kind of stay focused on this, is that we see there is research happening. We know that things are going to change, and that is hope in itself. So you can try to get involved in studies that are happening or contribute to the work that we're doing or the other advocacy groups are doing. And that alone can make you feel like you're contributing to making change. And I think for some people, that's really important.
Absolutely. Well, Melissa, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. You know more about UTIs than any other woman that I know, and you're like our official ringleader now. So
more than I ever wanted to know as well.
Oh, I know, I'm sure. You've created such a wonderful site, liveUTIfree.com. Thank you for sharing that with us, and we're so lucky to have you.
And thanks for contributing to making change with us. It's really important.
Of course. Bye, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you for tuning in to our special interview. We loved answering your questions and getting to know each other a bit more. For more information on chronic conditions, fun travel adventures, and all that jazz, follow us on social media and at our blogs. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and leave us a comment down below. See you next time.